After hearing that the Cardinal would attack my town, I decided to send a spy towards the Cardinal. He entered the town, hidden by everything, and he visited the townhouse of our dear lady friend Anne. He spoke to Anne about the coming plans and if she heard any news about the Cardinal. Then he went on his way to find me, the Lord of Dragonspire Castle. The bells tolled upon Dragonspire. There was a plan needed to build a castle. Of course, to build this castle, we needed to have stone, wood, and plenty of other materials shipped from overseas and elsewhere. Of course, first we are going to build a mine to supply the castle with stone. At first, I decided to dig quite deep and remove the debris. After digging the hole, I decided to dig down and collected all the precious stone that was needed to build the castle walls and connected it by a path that led towards the castle and the town. Of course, this castle needed a lot of stone and other materials. Limestone, coal, wood needed to be collected. Afterwards, I also decided to add my first defensive feature, a moat. This moat would lead from the town and around the castle. This, of course, will be quite a lot of work, and I will make it deeper if necessary. After digging out the moat, I decided to build a little bridge, connected it to the town and with the path. Oh, that's a nice bridge. You can look at the warehouses where the food is stored. Then I finished it by clearing out this dirt and connected the water with the moat, which I really liked how it looked. Of course, the water will not be there yet. Soon it will defend Dragonspire Castle. After finishing the bridge, I am going to make the castle. The castle is built using stone, limestone, and other parts of stone that I found in the surrounding area, cut by my master stonemason. I also filled up everything else surrounding the castle, so that the castle would hold up on these foundations, which I then would lay with stone. I also fortified this part of the wall, because here it will lead down to the slope, so I can better defend it, and this will be the inner courtyard. I also wanted to store some food and supplies if there was a siege, so I built a cellar. First, I needed to clear off all the debris that was in the cellar, but I wanted to make it a little bit deeper. I also destroyed some dirt. Then I added the walls and some foundation to support it. As well as a stone floor to keep it from being wet and to add some stability. To keep the castle from collapsing, I also added pillars, which are going to hold up the castle high while I build more floors. This is the most important part of the castle, so it wouldn't collapse, the food gets stored during a siege, and it's gonna look very pretty. I repeated this process several times, and then reinforced the castle walls below with extra layers of stone, so that even if the castle got shot down there, the castle would not be breached. Then I added arches in order to support the weight of the roof and the great hall, the sleeping quarters, and the battlement. These arches make sure that all of the weight is redistributed finely, and will provide a strong foundation for the rest of the castle, which I will repeat everywhere in the cellar, which also looks very nice. Then I added some slabs to create the vaulted ceiling in order to redistribute the weight from the ceiling and the great hall right on top. Oh man, I love how it's gonna look soon. I worked day and night to complete this cellar, and eventually the finished product was quite spectacular. Layered arches upon layered arches. And here is the finished product of the cellar. Like over here I would put barrels of wine and beer and all kinds of poultry, as well as food, grain, and necessary supplies can be stored here, out of the rain. And it sits on a beautiful location inside of the courtyard, below the castle, which provided a good overview of the valley. In order to build up, I will be making some scaffolding, made from the locally sourced wood that I gathered before. We'll place the scaffolding right here against the wall and then connect it with a ladder made out of rope. This is to ensure that I can build the great hall and put all the details around the wall and to get up easily before I'll be making my staircase. Then I made the walls out of limestone, the beautiful white limestone that sits on top of the other source stone. This is to just make a fun little contrast between the locally sourced stone and the carved stone. I also placed some tiles down to give the great hall a beautiful appearance. As the great hall, it needs to be perfect because I will be meeting lords, ladies, and the garrison in there, which means that it is quite an important room. After a long day of working, I decided to go to my little cabin and slept the night over there, and then the next day I will be making the great hall. I went back to my little castle and built the staircase towards the great hall. These will be scaffolding so that in the case of a siege I can burn these down or destroy them. I added some beams to uphold the scaffolding and where the wooden framing will be placed. Then, on the other side, I would build some arches in order to put firewood there for the winter. This will be a bit more encased with stone, as I will also be putting arrow slits, walls, and some more fortifications on there, in order to protect the more vulnerable backside of the castle. After finishing the scaffolding, I went further making the walls out of limestone. The staircase will also be made out of stone and limestone. This will be a much more stronger staircase, so I can carry more goods upon it, such as arrows, bows, weapons, and more. After finishing the staircase, I'm going to make the place where all the firewood is going to be for the winter. These will be the same like the basement, with Gothic arches, also to make it more stable and to make a nice place for my firewood. Then I added the arrow slits right here, on the other side of the wall, where it's a little bit less protected. Over here I will put slabs, arrow slits, and vertical corners, so that I still can look around and destroy anyone that comes around as an enemy, while being simultaneously protected at the side. I also embellished it with more wood on top of it. And also on the other side near the staircase, I added another additional arrow slit. Additionally, I also added some wooden details so the colors would really spring out. After finishing the arrow slits, I am now going to build the Great Hall. The Great Hall is one of the most important rooms inside of this castle. Here I will receive the lord and ladies and allies, as well as important meetings, taxes, and all of the important things that I need to do inside of this town. I am building this Great Hall inside of the Gothic style. I will also be using the limestone that is featured in the rest of the castle to make it a nice contrast. Furthermore, I will be adding white-blue friezes along the walls, so it looks a little bit more colorful, like in real medieval castles. The walls were colorful and detailed, flowers and painted on. And right on the top, I'm using an additional frieze to mark the roof part. Beautiful white-red floral design. Then I added beams to support the further structure and the other rooms above the Great Hall, which is gonna be the bedroom. I also added some floorboards with some support next to it, as to make it slightly more detailed. To finish off the detailing of this room, I added wooden corbels under the beams. These are perfectly carved by my woodsman. Then, to finish it off, I added these arches around the window to really encompass this room as the Great Hall. I made the fireplace. This was quite a difficult fireplace, so I added multiple blocks in order to get these arches right. But the end result looks stunning. To make the fireplace really stand out, I added travertine plinths and added vertical quarters with the travertine plinths. Then, in order to make the cool Gothic room more Gothic, I added these traceries made also out of travertine. And I added some extra quarters next to it. There, a beautiful, stunning fireplace. Secondly, I'm going to start to build a kitchen right next door. This is going to be the grand kitchen, where all the food for the banquets and for me will be made. Here again, the interior walls will be made out of limestone. There will not be many decorations here because mostly this is used for cooking. I will also be making a wonderful fireplace to cook the food and smoke the meat. Because back in the medieval ages, smoke was very important in order to slowly cook meat and to save it for later. And of course, who doesn't like the smoked sausage? I will be adding quite some detail for this kitchen, especially in the fireplace, just to give it a little bit more shine. I will be adding these wonderful lime mortar brick with red masonry, because I think it looks stunning and it just gives a nice extra towards this kitchen. Of course, the main usage for this hearth is cooking. And I'm very glad how this one turned out. Then, later in the evening, almost night, I added these beams in order to get to the next level. Same wood and same structure, like in the Great Banquet Hall. As well as adding these corbels. And to make a little bit more detail, and embedded it with some limestone bricks. And also added floorboards in order to build the next level. After finishing the Great Hall and the kitchen, I am going to make the secondary level. Here, there will be a storage room, a guest room, and my main sleeping quarters. First, I expanded all the walls to go up high in the sky. Then, I partitioned all of the rooms. First, the sleeping quarters of the guests, then a storage, and finally, my sleeping quarters. First, I'm gonna start working on my sleeping quarters. This is primarily made out of wood paneling with a tracery in it. I like to keep the Gothic motif throughout the entire build, as well as in the Great Hall. Here, the Gothic motif will also be present. Then, I will add some larger windows. Since these are a bit higher, I can use actual glass and bigger windows. While the lower section of the castle has arrow slits and smaller windows to keep out invaders. And here I can look over the town and all its splendor. I will also add some red, white, green Gothic friezes to align it with the same Gothic style that I incorporated throughout the entire build. Then, to make more detailed, I also added some more red lime mortar bricks throughout this build. I do generally really like this, because it just looks a bit more detailed. And for the upper corner frieze, I decided to go with a wide red ribbon frieze to really make it more detailed. Then a fireplace will be installed so I can keep warm within the winter. Of course, this will be another one of those grand fireplaces, but this time I have ceramics. These beautiful green ceramics I got from Venice, which also I will buy all my furniture from a merchant. I added some more Gothic features, but then in sandstone, and on top of that, more red masonry lines. This is to ensure that it looks like it belongs in the room, and it gives such a nice vibe to it, and colorful. Below the hearth, to not burn my floor, I put some more Gothic stone. Then I added more beams and added these wooden fancy corbels again, to really align it with the rest of the castle in the same kind of style. Then to finish it off, I added these floorboards again. I think that the final representation of this castle is absolutely spectacular. But look at it. Very pretty. Next to my bedroom, I'm gonna make a guest room. This is where any lords, ladies, or important people would sleep in, if they needed a night to stay. Here, I am also making it in the Gothic style, but I am adding a slight tapestry to the walls to make it a dark green room. It might be a little bit darker, but it still looks quite awesome. Then, I will also be adding this line in the same style. Then I added these arches to the window to make the windows look spectacular, as well as added these beams and the floorboards again. I really loved how this one turned out. As well as in the hallway next door, more floorboards and beams will be added for construction. Then I will also be adding a toilet, because back in the Middle Ages, the toilet was right at the castle wall, which then dropped down. Here I'm making a basic wooden toilet with a trapdoor, which also could be incorporated during an escape. Of course, a quite nasty escape. I'm adding these half slabs next to it. and then build up. I'm also adding a slight roof made out of shingles in order to hide the occupants of this wonderful garderobe. I'm adding a wonderful curtain made out of the Dragonspire colors, red and gold. Now on towards the more defensive features of this castle. Of course, everywhere below the castle and under the sleeping quarters will be these arrow slits, because they are basically the defensive possibilities that we have. They'll be added in the kitchen, the great hall, and the entrance, to keep any enemies away. As on towards the next level, I'm going to build a roof. On this roof, here, this will be made out of wood. There will be a general shape. This is where the lookout post is. Here, soldiers can sleep, but also look towards danger if anyone is approaching the village. And it allows for a good sight over the valley. It is also used to store weapons, and many more. Of course, the roof is held up with these giant lumber beams that spread across the entire roof in a square shape, upheld with smaller beams on the side. It's a very, very pretty picture, as you can see. Of course, this is a very, very careful process, and it will take quite a lot of work. Then I added the shingles, a lot of staircases and blocks, all made out of locally sourced wood. After a while, the hat is on top of the roof, with the fireplace chimney right on top, and supporting the entire structure. And after finishing the roof, I put the spires where eventually flags will fly. And under the roof, everything will be made out of wood, with windows overlooking the valley, where guards will be set up and it can be protected from any enemies. While under the windows there will be a gap where arrows can be shot, stones can be dropped, and it will be easily protectable if anyone tries to put ladders against the castle. After finishing the entire structure, I put in the little details inside of the building, such as glass, which gave a very nice view, like a Renaissance painting. Then I added the outside walls, of course still made with limestone, which just shined alongside the village, and the castle was almost done. And I added some more battlements, arrow slots, and more fortifications. Of course, there's also need to be an interior. Therefore, we are going towards the shopping mall of the West, Venice. Of course, for such a nice castle, we are going all out to get the nicest things possible from all over the continent. So I spoke with a merchant to get some wonderful and beautiful pieces for inside of the castle. I spoke to this merchant about possibilities to have beds, tables, and hand-carved wood in order to really make this castle a very beautiful castle. After a couple weeks of waiting, until all of the interior has been placed inside of the castle from Venice, I want you to meet a couple new heads, such as Reginald, one of our guards. I think the castle looks absolutely pretty. Like down here, we have the cellar, which is going to be stocked with food for the banquet, eventually. And in this courtyard, we got some beautiful battlements, as well as a side door towards the other part of the village. Doesn't it look beautiful with the tiny little bridge? I'll just close this door up. Then over here, you can see that everything is also already stacked with the firewood. So it stays dry, so I can use it in the winter, because I got quite a stack. And of course, we got a couple more guards. We also have Cellar. And another one that sits on the battlements. That is Stanislav, also a guard, which looks out upon the valley, in case there's an enemy attack. Now, let's go inside and see how the interior is. But right here, near the firewood, we can go up these stairs, with these beautiful arrow slits, and over there you can see that there's also a tiny river being made. Here you can also see the gap where the arrows can be fired. And in here, we got the Great Hall, where everything is prepared for the feast, which will happen very soon, which I will gather all my allies. And besides the Great Hall, we got a kitchen, with also a new chef. His name is Aiden. You can also see that there's a lot of drying vegetables. And on the second floor, we also have the toilet with a beautiful view of the valley, a potential escape route, the manure pile, and we have the guest bedroom right here, with all kinds of furniture from Venice. And you can close these shutters to keep the lights out, or for protection from enemy attacks. Here we have the storage filled with wine. And here's my main bedroom, with a nice seating area, with a pen and quill, beautiful views over the village, a giant fireplace, and more hand-carved furniture from Venice. And of course, more shutters. And a bath, even. Then, on the highest level of the castle, we got beautiful views of the valley. And of course these gaps where you can shoot arrows with. And we even have another guard who is on watch here. His name is Vinicio, which I got from Venice. There you can see that I can shoot between the gaps of this to hit the enemies if they are ever arriving. And I can look far and wide into the distance. But of course, we now need to gather our allies to host a banquet in order to discuss how we are going to fight this enemy, this Cardinal. Of course, that will be a different time. Right now, we need to wait until they arrive to fight the Cardinals' armies. But at least the castle is done and the fortifications are set. Now it is waiting for the battle to come.